how many of us are following what's happening in terms of what the US is doing besides tariffs? We are talking a lot about tariffs, so we just need to get a bit out of it. Just a bit, we'll come back. Besides the tariff, what else is happening? What else are they busy about in America? There is war, isn't it? Yes. I would like to focus on this tiny part in the global, in the Arctic there. What's happening in the Arctic?
Greenland?
Yes, Greenland. What's happening to Greenland? Aggression.
Disintegration of the NATO.
Disintegration of the NATO. That's something. Okay. Anything else? If I'm actually reading correctly and understanding, I think at some point the US was even offering money to buy Greenland. Is that correct? Why is there that desperation? They've got fires all over. Whether they are correct or not, that's something else. That's not the point of our discussion. But we want to know about what's happening there in Greenland. Why to the point of even wanting to buy or even just forcing themselves on Greenland?
Okay, they're citing security reasons, but also because of the minerals.
To what?
The resources, the rare earth resources that are present there.
Sorry, we shared. Remember, this is an opinion, no? All right.
One of the reasons is security.
Yeah.
But another one is also access to the resources, because Trump keeps on saying the EU are not utilizing it as they would. He likes to drill and to extract those minerals from Greenland.
Yes, that's his opinion. That's his reading.
Strategic interest.
Yes.
Because the Greenland is located in midway.
Yes.
Between Russia and Europe.
Yes.
And American interest is to be closer to the enemy. So if they are to take Greenland, they'll be very close to pouncing on on Russia.
Yes, yes. All those are, they are in addition to what I also have. Not that mine is maybe, my opinion takes precedent. But I just wanted to share this with you. That were you aware that Greenland is actually on the strategic route to the moon? It is the passage to the moon. And whoever gets to be in Greenland first between the US, China, and Russia, it means they are what? They are now strategically positioned to access the moon. And what's there in the moon that's so important? What's there in the moon? Head of helium-3? Helium-3. That is the next gold as far as America is concerned. That's the next gold, helium-3. And why helium-3? Helium-3 is going to actually going to provide clean energy. And if anyone who gets in touch of that and they manage to connect and start mining that, it means they'll be having control over this strategic resource, and it means their power supply, their energy, clean energy, will be uninterrupted. And once you are in charge of that, of energy, what happens? Automatically, you are what? You are a superpower. So that's the structure. That's why we have America actually trying, by all means, to actually lay their hands on Greenland. And where does that take us to? It means that maybe for some countries, and especially Africa, which has got to keep on running, it means the next dependence cycle could be loading, more so on the energy system and digital infrastructure. As we get into our discussions, we're going to be talking about data centers, how much energy they consume. And once the US says that, it means that they have the power to actually cool their center, the data centers will be uninterrupted. and what a source of mighty power. So today we are discussing Africa's regulatory landscape. Can I be assisted to there? Why does it matter? Africa generates amounts of data, yet only 1% of it is hosted in the continent due to lack of trusted environments and infrastructure. It's actually laid by the African Data Dialogue Report. Secondly, regulation of cross-border data flows is disharmonious. Not only do laws differ widely from country to country, but the movement of some types of data is heavily regulated. There is need for some data flow to easily cross borders, with the exception of personal data that does require regulation. Operationalizing data justice and agency. Does participation mean ownership? Here we're talking about, as agents, I was talking about African agency. The need for Africa to actually take control, take ownership of whatever is discussed about Africa. Then reclaiming the value. It encourages the use of local computing facilities and data sharing to ensure that it is used in Africa for African development. Right. Why I want to bring this to the fore is when we're going through the slides, we remember why it is important for Africa to have agency and for Africa to understand why it is important to also have to own those data centers and also to have their local computing facilities and data sharing to ensure that it is used for Africa, for the African development. And this actually fits into the extraction that has been going on in Africa. It is also important to have an assessment so that we know where we are coming from and we know where we are going. So in terms of that, there are these pillars which have been done by the Regional Digital Trade Integration Index, which was done by ESCAP. So it is these pillars against which countries have been assessed. So a study was done on 29 countries. And these are the pillars that these countries were being measured on, with a score between 1 and 0. 0 meaning that the country is actually ready with its environment. The environment is ready for digital policing. And with a score of 1, meaning that the environment still needs to be worked on. So these pillars, as I said, they form part of the assessment, and we will measure our protocols in terms of the delivery they do against those pillars. So on this study done in 2022, let's see what was happening. We have got some scores there. Intermediate reliability, 0.47. Tariffs, 0.40. Those are scores. Telecom and competition, 0.40. Public procurement, 0.32. Cross-border data, 0.30. Domestic data, 0.45. IPRs, 0.42. Content access, 0.37. Standards and procedure, 0.29, investment restrictions, 0.28, online sales, 0.26, non-technical MTNs, 0.10. And then the key to the graph, to the table there, it says traditional policies, the average score was 0.27. The digital governance policies average score was 0.37, and other domestic policies average score 0.35. The study was done in 2022. So what do we draw? And sorry, there was an overlap. 0 reveals that policy environment is good for digital trade, and 1 reveals that policy environment is not conducive. So what do we learn? What sort of computation can you draw from that in terms of our position as Africa in digital readiness? Based on the key there. Are we doing well? Zero reveals that policy environment is good for digital trade. One reveals that policy environment is not conducive. Do we have a zero there? Sorry? We're halfway. So what's your opinion? Are we doing badly or we're on the right path? Yes, that's very encouraging. I also feel that way, on the right path. What has been happening? What has been happening in terms of what? Here I'm trying to share with you that in terms of digital preparedness, yes, we've been doing something about it, but we're experiencing dilemmas. Remember, we're talking about digital regulation. We are also talking about the digital economy. The digital economy was actually thrust upon us, the fourth industrial revolution. It was thrust upon us. Who remembers our first experience of us finding ourselves in the position where we had to actually ensure that you knew something about computers? When did that happen? COVID, yes. Thank you. Maybe you can explain your experience. It's an afternoon and we've had lunch, so I just want us to be as interactive as it can possibly happen.
Okay, thank you very much. COVID came at a time when we were, can I call it, we had finished part of the negotiations for the FCFTA and amidst other kinds of jobs. Now, where I work, my office, we provide legal services to the whole of government, and it requires a lot of interaction with the outside world. Now came COVID, and suddenly we cannot move. We cannot move. The government must keep working. Things must keep being done. So despite the COVID, the vaccines and all that, it got to a point now you cannot travel, but you must engage. We didn't know that there existed anything like Teams, Zoom, yes, Google Meet and all that. But you were thrown into the deep end and you must get it done. Because wherever it is, the developed world are sending you, telling you, there's the link. They send it on email, at least email all of us had. But now all these other things. So you start wondering, okay, I need to download this app and the other, but we just needed to get in and do it. So I think it made all of us now be aware of the importance of the digital sphere.
Thank you. Any other experience? Remember, you are trade negotiators who are also mothers. As mothers, when you put on your cap as a mother, and I'm being deliberately exclusive, mothers. Mothers and our children, certainly our children are no longer going to school. The prospect of raising an uneducated child, yet the parent is educated, was so scary, isn't it? Then what was the gap that was revealed there? Yes, Justice, you can speak.
You had to learn to help your children with their school through the online platforms and do all the work without in-person contact in school.
Thank you. You had to ensure the teachers also kept on, as long as they had your phone number, they would load your mobile phone with homework. Then you realize that now this child no longer, the mobile phone is not for maybe for social media or anything. It became a tool that was highly necessary. So in the home, everyone now had a what? Had a computer, some form of computer. In the meantime, this digital economy, our brothers, our big brothers, if I may call them that, actually this writer calls them the three digital kingdoms. The three digital kingdoms. I like the allegory. The three digital kingdoms were actually caucusing, not even caucusing, they were actually looking around and taking advantage of what was happening. And what was happening is that they, in terms of the digitization, they started looking at the laws of what's supposed to happen. And here this afternoon, we're going to look at the orientation and the philosophies that actually was driven by the three digital kingdoms. Why these digital kingdoms are important? Because it is us, Africa, as we are always running, that we're now struggling to identify which country to actually identify with. It's not only Africa, by the way, the other continents as well. We're trying to struggle along and see whatever is going to align with their dreams of digitization. When we look at the US was actually firm-oriented. When it looked at sovereignty, they looked at the firm. What came to the US first was actually their firms. They were worried more about their firms in the rising of the digital economy, how to protect them and how to ensure that business within America was not going to be interrupted. And in any case, the opportunities that were there, they were supposed to be accessed by their firms first. So we are looking, the core philosophy there was a firm sovereignty. And here data was considered as a commercial asset to be moved freely. Instead of the US actually creating barriers, instead they liberalized that space. They allowed their firms, their businesses, their enterprises to grow. And the approach to data trade was it prohibits data localization and treated privacy as a consumer right and security as a business risk. So as far as the America was concerned, data localization was a no. And privacy was treated as a consumer right and security as a business risk. Then when it came to China was state-centered. They looked at themselves, they looked at the state, the government looked at itself and told itself that data is a matter of national security and treated data as a matter of national security and social order. So it was mandatory to localize the data, important data, so as it were, but when you read further, find that almost all the data was controlled. And then they brought state access to information without any individual consent. So there is nothing. Maybe I can't say there is, but at that time there was nothing like protection of personal data as far as China was concerned. The data belonged to the state. And then in the EU, they were individually focused. They were more concerned about the sovereignty of the individuals. Privacy as a fundamental human right, the GDPR, that we are also used to, we are so much used to. And what does this do? It limits transfers to countries with adequate protections, uses high standards as digital sovereignty. So I think most countries globally, they did adopt this individual-centered philosophy, which was being driven by the European Union. Maybe for that, for now, we'll stop there and touch something else. So I'm still going to go back to that table. we are going to go back to that table, but now, for now, I want to share on what Africa was doing. How was Africa responding? Or besides maybe choosing who to align with, whether to be Eurocentric or maybe to go with China. We have seen that actually we were aligning also with the EU. So Africa, in the meantime, as early as 2014, that was before the advent of COVID, they were already thinking about regulating these spaces. The Malabo Convention 2014, it took so much. It took almost forever to actually be ratified. And the ratification of the Malabo Convention has been very slow. But I'm happy to say that by 2023, it has been ratified, although the uptake still remains relatively slow. Then there was the Afra Data Policy Framework. This one is the good one, where actually it also laid the ground for all the other laws to actually emanate from the Africa Data Policy Framework, which was now acting as a guide on how we regulate these digital spaces. Then the African Union Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa, which works in tandem with the Africa Data Policy Framework. Then there's the African Economic Regional Consortium, then the African Information Society Initiative. All those are actually strategies or interventions to regulate our digital data spaces, digital economy spaces. The Policy and Regulation Initiative for Digital Africa, PRIDA, and then the ATO, the Online NTP Mechanism, Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. Now, these 1, 2, 3 instruments, they became the basis of the AFCFTA before the launch of the AFCFTA Digital Trade Protocol. After deliberations, we came up with the AFCFTA Digital Trade Protocol, comprising of 11 parts. And the parts, I think they are there for you to see. There's part 1. I didn't want to go into detail with those because they are there in the protocol. We can have access to them and see. But this is how it's actually been done. We've got 11 parts and with 52 articles. So I couldn't capture the articles there. The articles are there. If you go into the actual protocol, you're going to see those articles. Remember, I promised that we're going to go back to that table where we see how our protocol has been faring. Right, the European Union, the privacy benchmark, based on individuals and the models via GDPR. Right. On this one, the key influence in Africa, research reveals that 61% of African countries have data protection laws that mirror the EU adequacy conditions, conditional flow regime. Transfers are restricted unless destination has sufficient safeguards, ratification of international treaties, and Europe's Convention 108. And on that, we have got examples. The examples that we have there, we have Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. Those are just few. There are more countries there, but for the sake of my space, I actually captured those few. And we have also got Morocco, Mauritius, Zimbabwe, and Senegal also being party to the Convention 108, Council of Europe. Then we also have the China sovereignty on data. We remember I said it was state controlled. What were the effects? What was the impact? Early localization strategy, EU digital transformation strategy 2020 to 2030. Initial pro-localization recommending storage of African residents' data within the continent for self-sufficiency. And this, the example of this one is the AU level policy. Remember, I preach on countries. I say these countries, they actually align themselves with particular countries. And maybe with other countries actually frowning down upon China, and China in turn frowning down upon those countries who are actually maybe exchanging their sovereignty in digital spaces. But what has happened now, we find that it is all jumbled up now. Countries are actually having maybe a hybrid of all those core ideas. And we see that the US is also moving towards what China was doing, to be conscious about state sovereignty. And maybe we've got an example. What has the US done to actually move away from their liberalization of these trade spaces? What has the US done? What did it do recently? I think we spoke about it yesterday.
The Americans forced the TikTok company, which actually was based in Singapore, to sell their division or their license for the USA to an American company, which happened to consist of owners relate to the Trump family and the group surrounding the Trump company. So I doubt it is a good example of...
No, it is. Actually, I think most... Sorry, continue.
Well, a good thing that the income from the IT business goes to the country that generates, where the income is generated. Another thing is that if that income goes into corruption in the individual state. So I see it in a sort of doubtful way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any inputs? If you can project your voice audibly enough.
So what happened to TikTok in the US is what we are talking about in the recent debate on the role of geopolitics in technology regulation, whereby the US wanted to ban TikTok from operating in the US on the argument that it was a threat to its security. But politically, it was simply because TikTok is a big competitor to other US tech companies. And therefore, under the Trump government, he argued that then they have to diversify TikTok and ensure that some of the investors are also on the TikTok, which is called ByteDance. So that is all. But so far, they have adopted some laws to in the US market, but still most of the users are on TikTok. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think another thing on sovereignty is the US has been complaining about China sending students to steal their knowledge and data. So they're trying to hoard the selling of technology from the US to China, because now China is using that to overtake the US. And also another thing is the fight around access to rare earth minerals resources. So it's one of the key things that they are fighting over. And then they have also tried to hamstrung the tech companies to invest more in the US and increase the capacity of the data centers, so that to ensure that they have control over that. Another thing is how they have tried to use the tech companies to improve their national defense system. There's been a recent fight between the government and Anthropic over use of AI systems for US weapons. So it's one of the things.
Thank you. But do we note the departure? Do we know the departure? Remember, the Chinese were actually being maybe looked upon in terms of their approach to the whole thing, and we now see the US also doing that. But it's not. I'm not actually being judgmental here. But what I'm trying to say is that the space is very fluid. You do what works for you. So as Africa as well, we do what actually works for us, isn't it? Do you agree with me?
we have that leverage like the US. Unfortunately, our economies, our systems are dependent on aid, and as such, even our own minerals are owned by foreign companies. Canada is one of the largest producers of many minerals, and when you look at it, it's because they own mineral sites in Africa. So that's one of the challenges we have. We do not have that leverage. We do not own our own resources. So even if it works for us, someone else is controlling what works for us.
Thank you. Any other contribution? So the AFCFTA Digital Trade Protocol was born. It has been ratified, as we were told yesterday, it was ratified in February 2024. And then it hasn't been completely ratified. But what actually it hasn't been ratified what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say the ratification threshold hasn't been reached yet. Right, but what comes out of it, allow me, the professor taught me well, I'm a good student, says when you're an expert, you say what you believe in. So this afternoon, I'm going to share with you what actually influenced the AFCFTA Digital Trade Protocol according to research, and with this research, I am aligned with the findings of this research. The Digital Protocol on Trade has actually steered away from alignment with the traditional three digital kingdoms, delivering an organic continental that was not guided by sovereignty considerations, but driven by data justice and collective rights depicted by the Ubuntu philosophy. Then the question is, how is the Ubuntu philosophy manifesting in the AFCFTA? Because it could be, the research could be well saying that, okay, it is Ubuntu, but then we now need to qualify. And as legal experts, I'm sure you have time to go through it and see that actually is the spirit of Ubuntu behind this digital trade protocol. While the word Ubuntu does not appear in the formal legal text of the AFCFTA Protocol on Digital Trade, its core tenets, communalism, inclusivity, and shared prosperity are fundamentally factored into the protocol's architecture. The protocol moves beyond the individualistic focus of Western models to embrace a collective data justice framework. How so? By prioritizing collective vision over individual agreements, often focusing on the rights of firms or the privacy of individuals. The protocol's preamble and Article 30 explicitly commit to the inclusion of rural and local communities, indigenous peoples, and underrepresented groups. Are we able to check on that? I'm sure we can access this. The instruments were shared with us. Can someone actually get into the instrument and confirm what I am saying? While you are searching for that, I'm taking for granted that we know what Ubuntu is. It's easy for someone coming from Southern Africa to assume. What's the word for it in Swahili? I know in Shona we call it Wunu. In Swahili, what do we say? Hutu. Yes. Attorney, are you able to read the text there from the actual instrument.
That's Article 30.
Yeah?
Okay, Article 30 is about digital inclusion. So state parties shall promote and facilitate the inclusion and participation of women, youth, indigenous peoples, rural and local communities, persons with disabilities, and other underrepresented groups in digital trade through, among others, A, promoting access to information and communications technologies, B, improving cross-border connectivity and interoperability, C, promoting accessible, affordable, safe, and reliable internet, D, sharing experiences and best practices, including the exchange of experts and with respect to digital inclusion, E, identifying and addressing barriers to accessing digital trade opportunities, F, sharing methods and procedures for developing data sets and conducting analysis in relation to their participation in digital trade, G, participating in regional and multilateral fora to promote digital inclusion, and H, improving digital skills, digital literacy, and access to online business tools.
Thank you. Right, right. Looking through, continuing with the lens of Ubuntu, we proceed. Article 31. You want Article 31? Yes. It was because I was just paraphrasing, trying to actually support the lens of Ubuntu, so I went on to try and unpack what's actually aligning to Ubuntu. Then we've got infrastructure as a shared communal resource, which is a tenet of Ubuntu philosophy. Remember, Ubuntu is premised on interdependency, as enshrined in Article 18F. So if we read Article 18F, is that coming out clearly that infrastructure is a shared communal resource? Can you read Article 18F from the instrument? Remember, these are just excerpts. I just selected them. It's not in any order, but it's just to qualify that this protocol is actually organic and represents us as people in Africa.
So, Article 18, digital infrastructure. State parties shall endeavor to, among others, A, promote the continuous development of digital infrastructure, B, provide an enabling regulatory environment to enhance universal access to support participation in digital trade, C, promote investment in digital infrastructure through partnerships between governments, investors, financial institutions, and development partners, D, promote interoperability and interconnectivity between different digital infrastructure among state parties. E, promote measures that increase the affordability of broadband and technology devices and services. And F, promote the sharing of digital infrastructure through, among others, the development of regional data centers, regional cloud systems, and network infrastructure to address infrastructure constraints among state parties and to achieve optimal utilization of the available capacity.
Thank you, Judge. What it actually shows there is the alignment of our infrastructure as a shared communal resources with the Ubuntu philosophies. And I also liked the way we are promoting the sharing of digital infrastructure through regional data centers and cloud systems. I think that was actually maybe identified. The data centers happen to be very expensive. And I don't know how many countries in Africa have got data centers. Would anyone know from the audience which country? I know there's a couple or one in South Africa.
There's one in Kenya at Konza, but the capacity is not that big. But I'm aware that there are plans to improve the capacity.
Okay.
Tanzania,
Yes. Thank you.
like
Thank
four?
you. Sorry?
Like 4 data centers.
In Tanzania?
Tanzania.
Oh, wow. Sorry?
Including one at Nelson Mandela.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Here in Arusha.
Here in Arusha. Okay. Zimbabwe? Dr. Mkaza? Do we have? It's work in progress. Nigeria? Data centers.
We also have one in Ghana.
Oh, there's also one in Ghana. I want to share those because this is strategic infrastructure. Remember, we were speaking about how there's this looming threat that once a superpower has that, like if it's got an interrupted power supply, like what the US is actually positioning itself to be, all the data could be kept in the US. And already the protocol was tracking in terms of who was going to own the data. And the way out was to come with this collective approach to everything, that we don't want countries approaching it in a siloed manner, because having a data center is very expensive. And the consequence, obviously, it means it will become a barrier to ordinary people it will be a challenge to connectivity. It becomes a barrier. So it's important to have data centers in Africa. Then shifting from extraction to value addition, I thought this was actually self-explanatory, because one of our cries is Africa, almost a common cry, is how our raw materials and resources have been leaving Africa to go and be exploited elsewhere and to be intend to come back to Africa at exorbitant prices. So Article 23, data innovation, encourages collaboration on data sharing projects involving researchers and local industry to ensure that data is used in Africa for African development. Please note that data is now a strategic community asset, not up for exploitation. I know in this conference we've been dealing with how data has become another oil or gold or the new currency. But I'm sure now you appreciate with all this about data centers and all, and how anyone who is in charge of the data can easily maybe use it against you, or maybe when you want that data, you pay an arm and a leg. And for the tragedy of it is that data will be actually coming from you. Another aspect of Ubuntu there, operational solidarity through mutual recognition. Finally, the protocol's focus is on interoperability and mutual recognition. Article 19, maybe this one we can actually have a look at it because it's very important, interoperability and mutual recognition. Let's go to the instrument and look it up. Any volunteers?
Article 19, state parties shall adopt certification mechanisms and disciplines for the mutual recognition of electronic authentication, digital certificates, digital identities, electronic timestamps, electronic invoices, and electronic signature, among others. Sub 2. For greater certainty, this protocol shall not prevent a state party from requiring, for a particular category of transactions, the method of authentication or certification mechanism to meet certain performance standards, or is certified by an authority accredited in accordance with its laws or regulations. Sub-Article 3, state parties shall promote interoperability in technologies and applications required to facilitate digital trade, including but not limited to trade administration documents, electronic authentication, electronic signatures, digital payments, digital certificates, digital identities, cross-border data transfers, and digital infrastructure. That is Article 19.
Thank you. Right, practical experience. Has any business actually experienced that? So what is actually being spoken about in terms of the three digital instruments that we shared earlier on under the AFCFTA? We spoke about PAPS, we spoke about ATO, and we spoke about the online reporting mechanism. What has been the experience? As our lawyers, haven't you heard disputes emanating from that? Or maybe the non-functioning of the online mechanism? Or the function, let's be positive, or the function, its efficiency.
So I had an interesting, so it wasn't a digital-based case per se, but there were some transactions that had to be proven by reliance on some digitally generated evidence. And what was interesting was that the lawyer for one of the parties was relying on a decision about 10 years back, which had disqualified, I think, some documents that had been shared through WhatsApp, I think. The people had a business loan and somebody had traveled abroad and they were acknowledging the dates and then they were disowning that correspondence. But the interesting thing is that since that decision, we have enacted some legislation actually that takes account of these digital transformations and how to treat that kind of evidence. And in our particular case, it was possible for the court to rely on that digital evidence, even though it was generated across jurisdictions and using the criteria outlined in the law to actually find based on purely digital evidence, which previously had been disallowed.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge. There is a demonstration of the digital protocol at play, because the reason why we are having that protocol mainly is to facilitate the e-trade facilitation. And once we have such cases, it means it is working. It could not be working maybe at full throttle as we expect, but we are getting there. Then another instrument, I just want to share on those instruments that are readily available, that you can even go into the internet right now and see that really what we're talking about is working. Let's look at ATO. And while some are looking for ATO, others look for the online reporting mechanism. You can maybe even check it under COMESA, if it's not maybe under the AFCFTA, but already COMESA has actually been doing that. Dr. Emmanuel? Maybe you can share more light on the COMESA online NTM reporting. Sorry.
Hello? Yes, I work for the COMESA Competition and Consumer Commission and not Secretariat. So, but insofar as it relates to digital matters, I think we do have provisions that cover digital matters under the COMESA competition regulations of 2025. But those that relate to trade, they are dealt with by the trade experts at COMESA Secretariat.
Thank you. Any findings on the AU trade observation? That's a beautiful facility that has been championed by the International Trade Center together with WTO, where we can see our markets, the goods, whether this particular product needs a certificate of origin. It's a very useful instrument in business. No access to it. No one has access to it. Sorry, Leah? Oh, the internet is okay. I understand. Yeah, there is Eto there, which is readily user-friendly as well. And maybe, let's try, I know the internet could be better, but maybe one last try about the e-tariff. The e-tariff on the AFCFTA website, AFCFTA Secretariat website, the e-tariff, which readily tells the importer or the exporter what is allowed and the country's position in terms of tariff offers, etc. Is opened. Okay. Can you share what you're experiencing? Just interrogate the system.
Okay, so for the e-tariff book, when you open, the first thing you see, of course, is the map of Africa. And then there are some prompts there about I am exporting from and I'm importing into, and then you can also search the product. You can also search for the state party. I think there's also something about the product description or the HS code. And then, of course, you can select the state where you intend to import. Then you can begin your search. So I think with this one, you can be able to tell, to get all the information you require, whether you're exporting or importing and what the tariff would be. The tariff would just be, it means to tell you what tax you'd expect to pay wherever it is you're taking your goods.
Excellent. You can trade from the comfort of your sofa at home and make decisions, million-dollar decisions, based on those instruments. We now move on to our challenges. Our challenges the challenges are listed there, and these challenges are obvious. We've experienced these, the infrastructure deficit. Whilst we're taking a toll of how many data centers we have in Africa, we couldn't readily ascertain, maybe because we don't know, but it's supposed to be information that is readily available. But because it's not readily available, assume that it is work in progress for most of the African countries. Then limited internet access, as well as actually experiencing right now in the hotel that connectivity is a challenge. Can you imagine when you're doing business and suddenly you have to wait for the internet to load? Then the high cost of internet itself, weak connectivity, then harmonization of digital regulations among 54 state parties with varied developmental levels. I think this is where maybe our legal fraternity, you have to maybe to put on your thinking caps when it comes to that. the spaghetti ball tends to affect each and every development that we have. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll give up because of that. Is encouraged with using the Ubuntu concepts, whereby we're not approaching these problems in a siloed manner. We should be able to overcome those. Then the uninterrupted power supplies, that happen all the time. And I'm actually even experiencing it here as I stay in this hotel. I'm experiencing brief power cuts, but it has the effect of disturbing, isn't it? Yeah, but so we need to overcome that. These problems are real. Then the cooling technologies and the uninterrupted power supplies. This is where maybe there's the inherent risk of us maybe actually having these superpowers, as you may say, actually coming maybe to take advantage of these issues. That's why we have, it's so serious. That's why I shared you the story about Greenland and its access to the pure clean energy. They call it clean energy because it is very important. It's also for them to cool their data centers and have an ideal climate for those data centers. And the next person who has got a data center which is not affected by power supply, which is not affected by the weather, will be king. Then overlapping commitments by state parties. This is in addition to that. Remember, we're talking about the AFCFTA allows state parties to actually sign bilateral relationships with other countries. While that is good because it gives them sovereignty or independence, but it can come back to be a barrier in seeing that the protocol takes off effectively. Right, we've come to the end of our slide. The conclusion there is that digital regulatory environment is a critical enabler in trade, more so in the emerging digital economy. Then in addition to the existing digital regulatory framework, the AFCFTA DP becomes a strategic instrument to facilitate and not only an e-trade facilitation, but to address data protection, consumer protection, and cyber security. Maybe we should touch on cyber security. What do we understand about cyber security? Why is it important? Or maybe on all those three, we still have time on all those three. Why is it important to touch on consumer protection and data protection? All the three in any order. Let's share on that.
I think first, consumer protection and data protection are linked in the sense that the data that these private companies require are linked to our financial accounts. They are linked to other personal data. So cyber security is important because now this data, since it's now a commodity that is being sold, is protected from access to by hackers or people who may want to siphon money from the consumers. Another thing about now the consumer protection is now broadening, being protected from unfair practices, restricted trade practices like price fixing, unfairly changing prices, collusions where companies come together and then they decide to unfairly charge the consumers. There's also things around misrepresentation and selling substandard products to consumers, but that's a broader conversation for consumers. So the essence of having cyber security is now to protect the consumer, the people, from that, and also it also relates to data sovereignty, because now if this data is accessed by foreign governments or enemies, then it can be used to attack the nation.
Thank you. Okay, now I want us to think a bit about data localization. What's your position as far as data localization is concerned? Remember, we were reluctant to regulate our digital regulatory space because the other main concern was the sharing of data or having your data being stored elsewhere. What's your position on data localization? Remember, it's an opinion, and you are free to say your opinion. Is it justifiable to have maybe negotiations get stuck because of where the data should be stored, where maybe Zimbabwean data should be stored? Countries are insisting on actually keeping their data locally.
I think in my view, the conversation reflects a reluctance to acknowledge how disruptive the whole digital technology is to our traditional notion of state sovereignty and the things that the state can control, because the pervasive nature of the digital technology, as it were, and how it has been exploited beyond the control of any, if you talk about blockchain technology, for example, we talk about Bitcoin and all those issues, they are functioning in a space that is not amenable to the same levels of control and regulation that we have conceived of in the ordinary traditional nation state. And I think there is a certain naivety for one to insist on proceeding to control that space using the same tools and the same methodologies that have served us well this far. I think there has to be a little more innovation to respond to that reality, because the reality is here, and we were talking about the US demanding certain data in return for certain aid and support. There's so much that one can do realistically, but I feel like there must be an acknowledgement that we are talking about a phenomenon that is a little less easy to wield and manage using the old conceptions of what the state can do. Because we've already talked about data centers being very expensive to run. Now, if you insist on having it under your control, how do you do that? You already have challenges. What investments do you need to make in the energy sector to make this a feasible solution? But meanwhile, the technology is not waiting for us. It's running ahead.
Thank you. There's someone.
We were discussing Greenland before, and I'm from Denmark, which has sovereignty over Greenland. Part of the American commercial plan with Greenland is actually to move the data centers to Greenland to bring down costs, the cooling costs. But generally, most of the data, maybe over 90%, are commercial data that is probably not as sensitive as other defense-related and other very sensitive data. So I suppose that the commercial data can be placed in an appropriate geographical location covering data from several countries, whereas each country has to take care of the very essential data essential to that country. Thank you.
Thank you. Another input? I was wondering, right, let me be the devil's advocate. Not that the advocates are devils, but I'm just using it in the daily language. Right, storing your own data, does it add value to your data? Does it add value? Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave it at that. We will answer it in our own minds. Right. And then in closing, as 1/3 of the world's population and workers will be African 2075. Can you grapple with that? By 2075, 1/3 of the world's population will be African. Right now, we have what? The demographic dividend. But we must not always rest on our laurels and talk about this demographic dividend without qualifying it. Having a demographic dividend that is not skilled, does it add value, like just maybe keeping your own data? I don't expect answers to that, but maybe it's a discussion for another day. But whatever this is a good development for us, investing in bridging the digital gap, what we are required to do, to set us up as the African cheetahs that will dominate the world. That's why I love that cheetah will dominate the world. If we get our ducks in a row, Africa will be great again. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. We still have some 12 minutes, and just in case he has a question or a comment. So, do we have any comment or a question to the beautiful young lady here? No? Then at least we should answer the last question. Can we respond to the last question that she posed about can you keep your own data? I know an organization called Shell. Shell has a data center in 3 countries. It has one in France, second one in Houston, Texas, and another one somewhere in Asia. I was just wondering whether this can tell anything. But some people say that in case of anything happen, if you are keeping it for yourself, then everything is dead. Ukraine is in shambles because of the war, but I think many things moves as normal. People are still getting paid because they have also stored their data somewhere else. So whether if anybody to respond, madam, or you wish not to respond, you wish nobody should respond.
No. I think we can have the conversation. Yeah, because maybe responding is a serious word. Let's have the conversation. Okay, Justice, yes.
I think we must recognize that, like you've already said earlier on, data is the new oil. So mining data and having access to data has got its own value in and of itself. And in terms of AI technology, the more data they have, the more learning and therefore the improvement in their performance. So access to data will always be something that the technology would want to have. And if you can have a say in how that data is accessed and if there can be value exchanged for giving access, for me that would be the most important thing. Whether you have to insist on storing it yourself, I think is not as important as to what value is attached to that data and therefore extracted when you are sharing it. Because I think for me that's a more critical question, because accessing it will actually help to improve the performance of the technology overall. And if there can be a meaningful business transaction around that data, why not? You should be able to consider it, of course, with all the privacy and all the guarantees that have already been alluded to.
Thank you very much. I just want to make two comments. The first one is to deal with digital or the electronic signature. What has been happening also is that most countries do not have a database of your signature. There's no database. Okay, to say this is the authentic signature for Mugaza. Therefore, the issue now that arises, especially back home in our courts, is to say, in the absence of an official database of an electronic signature, how then does it become an issue of admissibility when it comes to documented or documentary evidence in courts? So as we move towards digitalization and the digital economy, it may be necessary at some point to have a proper database of electronic signatures. So we've had that issue, for example, when you look at the US, that in certain states you can vote without an ID. It was one of the major talking points for Trump 2 election. And currently, he is pushing very strongly to say you need to have a voting ID for you to go to your polling station and vote. Then you also have got the issue of Starlink. Starlink is more than just connectivity. It's a whole complete different game in terms of data storage. So as we move towards this uptake in terms of technology, countries are also very skeptical in terms of access to that particular data. I think, as was mentioned yesterday, Zimbabwe was one of the few countries that then refused to enter into a pact with the US government in terms of the releasing of health data in exchange for certain aid. So we still have got to tread very carefully that it is not just a matter of digitizing our economies, but also the security aspect of it. It should be able to address the concerns that are raised time and time again by...
Thank you, Dr. Mkasa. Thank you. This brings us to the end of our lecture this afternoon. It's ongoing. It's the end in terms of presentation, but we should actually go back and read more and try to improve this protocol through engagements, through seminars, through discussions, because I'm sure right now we now have exchanged our contacts with each other. The discussion should still continue, even in our own spare time, so that in the end we have the Africa that we want. Thank you.
Let's clap for her, please, in a Ubuntu manner. So can we do it again? It is not enough. It is not enough. Thank you.